Welcome back for episode 4 of the ACR Growth Series. In this episode, we're talking about retention and essentially where profit actually lives and why you're ignoring it if you are a typical brand owner. Now, every pound spent on acquisition is typically wasted when the back end isn't working. So in this episode, I'm going to go through a little bit more detail around what retention really looks like for high profitable e-commerce brands. So one thing I want to start with before we move into the presentation is I want to ask a diagnostic question. And that diagnostic question is, what is your repeat purchase rate? Now, I'll just pause there for a second because most e-commerce brand owners cannot tell me that when I join them on a call. They cannot tell me what their repeat purchase rate. And if you don't know that immediately, it's fine, but it's a bit of a problem. And it's something that we need to kind of unpick and understand in a bit more detail. In this presentation, I'll show you exactly why. So what we typically see in e-commerce in terms of the model that's occupied and the model that's operated by most is they pour ad spend into a leaking bucket. So they fill that bucket up with acquisition spend, whether that's Facebook, Google, TikTok, wherever it might be. There is a present leak and there is no system to keep those customers in that kind of ecosystem. And this repeats indefinitely. So what typically happens is when you're pouring ad spend and you're acquiring these customers, you're bringing them into your ecosystem. By bringing them into your ecosystem, you want to increase customer lifetime value. Customer lifetime value is the fundamental number one important metric in e-commerce. I say this all the time and I mean it because it is entirely true. And the reason I say it's true is because if you are able to predict what a customer is worth to you over a 30-day period, 90-day period, 180-day periods, 365-day a year period, you're able to profitably understand the growth of your business. You're able to actually predictably understand where your business needs to go in terms of acquiring more customers. Do you need to acquire more customers? What does that lifetime value look like? Now, with no sense of capturing and retaining these customers into this process, what you're actually doing is you're essentially losing money. So how you lose money in this space? There's no automated email flows. There's no win back flows. So when a customer purchases from you once, you leave them 90 days without even trying to contact them again. There is a risk then that they go to a direct competitor. Because let's not forget, right? Once a customer is engaged with your advert on Facebook, that sends a signal back to the algorithm that this is the type of content they like. So what happens next? Meta starts serving your actual customer that you've acquired ads for your competitors. Horrible, but it's true. So let's break down a bit more detail in terms of what actually looks like with retention, and actually let's look at some of the variables that. Okay, so the variable that changes everything is the relationship with the actual lifetime value and the cost of acquisition. Now I'm going to just kind of expand this and go into this in a bit more detail. So LTV, lifetime value, CAC, cost of acquisition customers, right? So for a low LTV business, so this is a business that has low lifetime value. So it might be that the product's fairly kind of cheap to purchase and the customer doesn't necessarily need to purchase it over and over again. It might be a product that actually the customer purchases maybe once every 3 months. So there's a low return rate in terms of the customer coming back. Or as I said, it could be just that it's a kind of relatively low price product that doesn't really have much range. Now, in those circumstances, there's a very different kind of method to apply in terms of increasing lifetime value. And what that typically looks like is upsells, kind of broader product ranges. You might have an entry level product and then you introduce a higher level product. You know, there's a multitude of things you can do, but just for this purpose, if you have a low lifetime value business, you can probably stretch yourself to afford a £12 cost per acquisition. Okay, so these are just basic numbers. These are numbers just to display the kind of purpose of this. They're not specific to any actual business, but they might be relevant to you based on your existing costs. So low lifetime value business can probably afford £12 cost per acquisition, right? Now, the difference is a high lifetime value business can actually afford a £48 cost per acquisition, okay? And you might look at this and think, well, I don't want to spend £48 to acquire a customer. However, because you have a high lifetime value, Your business can afford to do this, which means you have a competitive advantage, because increasing that lifetime value brings increased profitability to the business, increased revenue, and it enables you to have a competitive advantage, meaning that you can actually spend 4 times more than your competitors to acquire customers. Now, the businesses with the highest lifetime value can outbid every other competitor for the same customer. Okay, and that makes a huge, huge difference. Step back at this point now. I know we're talking about retention. Previous episodes we've spoken about conversion. Previous episodes to that we spoke about acquisition. But in the very first episode, we were talking about system diagnosis. This is a key fundamental system diagnosis aspect here around lifetime value and CAC relationship, which is really, really important. So, and how the whole system kind of works together. Now, let's take a little look at the sort of retention architecture. And these are the kind of 4 layers that I think every kind of e-commerce business should have built. So layer 1 is essentially post-purchase flows. Now, post-purchase flows, there's actually a layer probably missing here, which is around kind of bringing customers in terms of sign-up forms and high converting sign-up forms, but I'll cover that in a bit of detail. But the kind of 4 layers, post-purchase flows. These are thank you emails, these are educational emails, these are review requests, these are cross-sell emails. These are essentially emails that recognize you've acquired a customer and you want to keep them in your ecosystem. These are the trust builders. Now, the benefit of sending these emails, and I say this to clients all the time. I had a call this week where I was trying to position this with a client who was pretty reluctant to send post-purchase emails because their whole perception of emails is that it frustrates the customer and annoys the customer. Well, your competitors are busy annoying that customer, so you may as well join them as well, right? And we'll just make sure your emails are better than theirs and they're more kind of congruent to what the customer wants to hear. But one of the things I want to pick up on here, this customer that you're emailing at post-purchase stage has already spent money with you. They've already purchased a product. Therefore, the levels of trust at this point are incredibly high. So it is the best time to email them. Okay, so post-purchase flows, layer 1, very, very important. Layer 2, the email and SMS system. Now this factors in things like welcome emails, abandoned carts, browse abandonments, VIP flows, and generating revenue 24/7 through those automated sequences. Now this is where essentially what you can look at here, I suppose sign-up flow sort of sits in this layer 2 really. It's about having that kind of growth of the list and bringing those customers on a journey to extenuate that email generated revenue. So you're hitting between that 30 to 40% kind of benchmark that we want for a profitable business. And layer 3, very, very important. I see this quite infrequently with most brands at the moment, is segmentation. And this is where you're essentially looking at purchasing behavior, engagement levels, what that kind of right message, right time looks like for that customer. Okay, so we're not treating every customer the same. We're not just broadcasting to the entire list all the time. What we're essentially doing is we're making sure that when we engage with customers via email, we're doing so in a manner that allows them to understand exactly what we're doing and exactly the message we're sending, and it feels relevant to them because it actually hits at the right part of the journey that they're on at that point in time. And then layer 4, equally as important, this is around your win back and loyalty. This is around re-engaging those lapsed customers. Think about it as a boundary, okay? So you bring the customer in, they purchase for you, they start in the center of the circle. The longer you take to contact them, speak to them, or actually engage with them, the higher the probability is that they actually leave your business and go to a direct competitor. So this is where win back is incredibly important. It's about re-engaging lapsed customers, incentivizing repeat purchases, and this is where subscriptions are really, really appropriate. Now, work on the 60-40 principle. So let's just bring this back into a bit of detail. So I'm just going to kind of go from right to left here. Now, the 60-40 principle with email marketing for me is really, really important. And this is a benchmark where I think you probably need most profitable brands to be. And that is that 60% of the revenue you generate from your emails need to come from automated flows. That leaves 40% of that coming from customized, tailored campaigns that you send 3 to 4 times a week, depending on the segment, depending on the audience, 3 to 4 times a week. 60% from flow means that the actual channel is generating revenue on demand all the time without your input. Those flows are essentially set up. Yes, they're reviewed. I hate this concept and this process I'm seeing from other email marketing agencies at the moment, which they're essentially saying, we do a one-time setup of your flows and then we gonna go. So what they're essentially saying is you pay them a stack of money, they'll put some flows in place, they won't assess the data on them, they won't monitor the data, they'll essentially set and forget, right? That is not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is setting up automated flows across those layers, but actually being able to focus in on where they're performing well, where they're not performing well, and making those relative adjustments in a continuous improvement manner to constantly drive towards these benchmark principles that we want, which is that 60-40 split. Most agencies will definitely chase campaign metrics because they'll either typically put a performance fee structure in place. Now that performance fee structure might be a certain percentage of sales from campaigns or certain percent of sales from revenue generated. Those types of agreements and those types of kind of relationships, they're fine to an extent where it incorporates all of your revenue and you drive into this principle. But when they're heavily focused on campaigns, then you're going to have an issue with customers. The unsubscribe rate's going to go through the roof because customers will constantly feel like they're being sold to, and that is not the nature of what we want here. I'm just going to kind of share with you here the kind of real results from a client of mine, and this is the results that we've got here. So, same email list, different system, 4-month window. These are the results. So their peak monthly email before I started was 11K a month. Okay, 4-month emails worth of revenue after we got to 163K. So we've exceeded 163K in email generated revenue over a 4-month period when their previous email kind of highest level was 11K. And that was around a Black Friday period. So, you've got to factor that in as well. But these are the results that you can get. 60% of that revenue came from automated flows running around the clock. 34.45% of the total UK store revenue was attributed to email. And each of the campaigns that we sent, because we were sending to segmented audiences, we understand the customers that we were sending them to, so we were tailoring the messaging, we were tailoring the subject lines, had 60+% open rates every single time. Now the reason I actually kind of flag here across 3 markets is because this client actually operates in the UK, EU and US. We managed all of their email revenue and all of their email systems for them and all of their conversion systems, and these were the results from the actual UK store. So unbelievable results, not unusual for us because of the processes that we actually follow. So kind of looking at the metrics that matter, because these are kind of some of the fundamentals that are never really picked up on most kind of videos of this nature. So the metrics that actually truly matter, you want for a profitable, high converting e-commerce brand, 30+% repeat purchase rate. That's targeting a healthy D2C brand. That's the target measure that we need to be getting. With your benchmark optimized lists within your email, you should be working towards a £4 to £8 piece of revenue per subscriber. Now, this will differ depending on your price points, depending on the brand that you have, but aim for that as around about a benchmark. 30 to 40% of your revenue, overall revenue for your store, should be attributed to emails. And going back to the 60-40 principle, 60% of that revenue should be generated through flows, and 40% should be generated through campaigns. So the flows are generating the majority of that revenue. The business that wins in this space essentially is not the one with the biggest ad budget, but they're essentially the ones that optimize this system. They're the ones that extract as much value as they possibly can from every single customer that they acquire. And this is where the profit equation comes in as well. I use this with clients all the time. Retention is where the profit is made. Acquisition is where the revenue is spent. So if you're driving increased lifetime value, increased retention, increased profitability from your emails, that allows you to have a greater level of marketing spend, to cast out to new audiences, to improve your acquisition process, assuming at this point that you've already got a high converting store and the email system is set up and optimized. So what changes when retention improves? Now, the retention rate, by increasing the retention rate, what you're essentially doing is you're increasing your lifetime value. Let me just zoom in a little bit here. So you're actually increasing your lifetime value. Your CAC becomes more affordable. If you think back to the previous slide, we were talking about where you're increasing that lifetime value, gives you more money to spend on ads. Therefore, having more money to spend on ads means that you can outbid competitors. And that means that you've got acquisition that can profitably scale. You can actually afford more for your acquisition, which means you can outbid competitors, and you can actually grow your customer base sustainably. And where your revenue from existing customers costs a fraction of your new ad spend, your profit margins are going to benefit tremendously as well, because it costs a lot less to acquire and generate revenue from your existing email list than it does to go out and acquire a customer through an ad platform based on channel distribution, channel attribution, and obviously costs to acquire customers. So what that owned infrastructure looks like, so when we're talking about profit margin from existing customers, what that owned infrastructure and rented attention looks like, that kind of versus component. Paid acquisition, most e-commerce brands are around that £15 to £40 cost per acquisition, right? Give or take. Depending if it's a really high expensive product, obviously it will be more than that, but it's typically kind of £15 to £40. That's the general CPAs. And then typically what I see with most brands is if you turn those ads off, that revenue stops. There's no compounding platform. They're very platform dependent and you cost more and more every year. On the flip side of that, email infrastructure, when you have an owned list that continuously grows, so you've got a list that grows, you have got the automated flows that are essentially running automatically, and you're actually compounding the level of revenue per subscriber, that email spend drops considerably. So the cost to actually drive revenue from your existing list is incredibly low compared to paid acquisition. I hope this has actually helped in terms of the insight to retention. The final episode coming up is a full and detailed look at the ACR method as what a fixed system actually can look like, and it's where you've got the three systems fundamentally working together under one framework, compounding returns for your e-commerce business and driving profitability beyond 100k a month. I'll see you on the next one. Thank you.